Welcome to I Have Something to Say, where unfiltered opinions meet raw authenticity. If you're tired of the same old canned answers and crave genuine conversations about real issues, then you've landed in the right spot. So buckle up for a roller coaster of diverse perspectives. Yours truly, Samí Haiman-Marrero, and my co-host, Chris Majocha, will dive headfirst into topics that impact our daily lives. From the boardrooms to the streets, get ready to hear real people cut through the BS and deliver the discussions you've been waiting for. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Sammy.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome to this episode where we have something to say.
We do have something to say. And so just so everybody knows, we've kind of been on a hiatus over the summer, right? A lot happening. Kids going, a lot of news happening, right?
Yep.
Now I have 2 kids in high school. We are entering this stage now where, I'm looking ahead into, okay, what's the empty nesting gonna look? I know
Right.
Chris, also got promoted. Yay.
Yep.
At work, right? And so that's required more travel, right? Tell us, Chris, all this new news for you too.
Well, yes, got promoted to senior producer at the advertising agency I work at in Boston, and and I mean, with that, just in general, this time of year, agency world gets crazy anyway. But certainly with the increased responsibility, it's been a little more taxing on time and things like that. But all good stuff, and continuing to make great content. But certainly in the midst of a cultural situation, or I think our current events situation, just with the election and everything as well. Can't ignore what is happening in our midst and in our news every day. And I know some things happened this week at a rally here, or not here, but the Trump rally, and Sammy and I just kind of want to get together and talk with everyone. Sammy, obviously, being a Boricua, a proud Puerto Rican, and myself not being Puerto Rican, being a gringo.
Listen,
but
you've been baptized, Boricua.
baptized. Exactly.
Baptized. You're the honorary Boricua, for the love you've demonstrated, right? For the island and the work you've done to really elevate the conversation about the situation on the island, specifically after Maria. And so I just think that this summer has been one of a lot of firsts and a lot of changes and a lot of new happenings and circumstances that go above and beyond ideology, go above and beyond politics, right? That really have to do with humanity, with kindness, with trying to find joy in the process, right? And try to lessen the levels of anxiety that, a possible fascist, right? Government or situation could bring, especially for communities that are viewed as the other. And so that's it. If up to this point of the podcast something doesn't sit well with you, it's time to jump off, right? Because I'm a little bit frustrated that specifically in the Latino community, after children were removed from their mother's arms and caged and placed in detention centers, and some of them never brought back reunited with their families, right? others died. Okay. And so there's just so much that happened. And Chris and I, and a group of us, right, had gone down to Homestead in Florida during that time to record and witness what was happening, because a lot of people called it, oh, that's not, it's fake news and it's an alternate reality, or whatever you want to call it. And so we're like, okay, let's give it the benefit of the doubt. So we got in our cars during a long weekend, July
Yep.
4th weekend. I think it was 2019, right?
Yep.
And we drove all 10 hours and 10 hours back the same day. Okay, just to bear witness of what was really happening. We saw it with, mira, with my very own eyes, right? What was going on. And thank goodness the perseverance and the advocacy of people that came from all over the
Yep.
US and even internationally to bear witness and protest shut down these detention centers, right? And
Right.
thank the Lord that we have been able to save face, right? And preserve some of the dignity of these families and have them reunited. But like looking back, I'm like, how did that not trigger protests, right, in the
Right.
Latino community? But I kind of understand because of the persecution aspect of it, right? It could have
Also very
been a
true.
bloodbath. It could have been something. I mean, if it's now being a threat, I think our community knew what could have happened, right? And so
Right.
then that fear, right? That fear of bodily harm, of physical harm
Yep.
is very prevalent. And so fast forward, here we are, and I think this was the straw that broke the camel's back. Okay? Calling Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean, or whatever the hell he said, right?
Yep.
Okay? Was just, yeah, the last straw. And I really hope people get off their asses and go out and vote, because as citizens of the United States, okay, we represent all Latinos too. Okay. And at this point, we're all Puerto Rican. Whoever understands the gravity of the situation. I saw someone post that actually. Okay. That said, we're all Puerto Rican today. Right.
Yep.
And I wanted to have this space with you, Chris, because you've been Puerto Rican since day one, right? Since the day I met you, and because I could talk about Puerto Rico all I want, right? Because I grew up there.
Yep.
This is my heritage. I love my island, but then there's a lot of bias, right, in that, right? Because it's home. Okay. And so I just wanted your perspective, right? From your experience in seeing how people responded in the aftermath of
Yep.
the biggest hurricane that hit the island, completely depleted its infrastructure, right? And left people powerless, killed thousands, right?
Right.
Like like tell me what you saw as a witness, right, with your own two very very own eyes, your beautiful blue honest and transparent eyes, Chris. Tell me, describe to me what Puerto Rico is and its people.
Well, yeah, and I think, and I've mentioned it on this podcast here before, but uh, after Hurricane Maria hit, and being in many ways involved with the Puerto Rican community from I was marketing manager for an arts organization, and we were doing a lot of work in diverse communities, and when my friends who, including you, Samí, but my friends who had family in Puerto Rico, and understanding the or seeing the stress of not being able to communicate, to reach people, to while phone lines were all down, there was no internet, there was no power, there was no way of getting in touch with people, and seeing that stress on the side when I was in Florida, never mind being in Puerto Rico, And then immediately, in the news, hearing all this like rhetoric of the immigrant conversation and illegals and just like people not understanding that Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens, and that it is America, and no different than anybody else, but yet people were, because it's an island and not connected directly by land, there was just a lot of naivety and ignorance being spewed. And then while I was writing articles on LinkedIn at the time, and wrote a couple about how businesses in Central Florida could benefit from engaging with the Puerto Rican community that was displaced and coming over, not just from a bottom line standpoint, but obviously the altruistic standpoint as well, of creating relationships and fostering and inviting people into your business. And on my LinkedIn posts, there were several comments coming in of people again talking about why would we let these illegals into our country to do business with. I wouldn't do business with an illegal. And it was like, well, again, Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens. And that's when I decided to do a documentary film to go to Puerto Rico and tell the story of a family that was displaced. And I did it for the purpose of telling the story and helping to educate or inform a population that had ignorant viewpoints. And then I got to experience the island. And yes, this was a year after the storm hit the island, so there was still a lot of damage and areas that certainly you could see the effects of the storm, but it was certainly not the island of garbage floating in the middle of the ocean. It was one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen, and I don't say that just to say it. Like there's mountains, there's beaches, there's city, there's a whole rainforest. It's diverse in landscape, diverse in culture, diverse in food and people, and music. And I just had in telling a very serious story, had the time of my life, being welcomed by people who I might not even have been able to communicate with verbally, but just the fact that I was there and telling this story, and I don't know, it was a very eye-opening experience for me. Again, I was doing this for like this documentary purpose, but I really felt invited into this community. And then all the Puerto Ricans that were displaced to Central Florida, where I was living at the time, and just creating those connections and continuing to tell a story there. It's Puerto Rico is a very special place to me because I did the film there and stuff, and I have a lot of friends from the island and who have family on the island. But it is every bit as much of America as any other place, and the people there embody the American dream and embody the ideals of Americans. And even you mentioned after when the kids were taken away and put in these like detention centers essentially, and that there was not an protest, and there was not people rallying in the streets of the U.S. But in Puerto Rico, when there's injustices that happen, the whole island can get together and right a wrong, and to protest for what's right. And I just think, again, that is what democracy is. That's what America is founded on. You have the right to protest and the right to do these things. And again, I think it's just a very beautiful place, a beautiful people, a beautiful culture. And to have the ignorance of saying it's a piece of trash floating in the ocean. I don't care if the guy's a comedian or what have you. Um, it's just very short-sighted, and I doubt that that gentleman had ever been to the island of Puerto Rico or really took the time to understand what Puerto Rico is, or maybe he has and just politically has his other motivations or intentions. But I think people just really have to pay attention to what is being said and understand that it's not as surface level as you'd like to think. Because I mean, even when he said that joke, and thankfully it was not received as well as he probably had intended. But he was like, "Oh, come on, all right, we'll get there. It's still like early in the night." And it's like, so it's just like setting up the the pins for just more BS to be spewed. And I don't know. It's offensive to me as an American to have a piece of America called a piece of garbage floating in the ocean or landlocked or what have you. I mean, I think every American should feel offended by that, whether you are identify as Puerto Rican or if um, get as easily burned in the sun as I do. Uh, it's just it's words matter. And I think a lot of people say, oh, well, it's maybe they say the wrong things, but the ideals or whatever, you got to look beyond the words. And it's like, well, no, like the words are the actualization of a thought, of an idea. And when you put that out, to be received, you have an intention with that. So I don't know. It's I can only imagine how you are feeling, Samí, and how the Puerto Rican community is feeling. And as you mentioned, somebody said we're all Puerto Rican today. And this week, by the time everyone views this podcast, but yeah, I just think it's not a time for us to just say, oh, there's another moment. There has to be a time where people say enough's enough. And when, again, a place like Puerto Rico, or any place that is a U.S. territory or in the U.S. is called a piece of trash by somebody in America, you have to start, questioning how American that person actually is.
And that's the thing, right? So first off, he's not a gentleman, he's just an outright asshole. Let's just start with that, right? And it's just part of the rhetoric,
Yep.
right? Coming from the MAGA camp. And I'm not talking Republicans, I'm not talking Democrats, I'm talking specifically the MAGA camp, right?
Yep.
And it's very dangerous. And it's part of this same narrative of the shithole countries and all of that,
Yep.
and so then it's just all lining up, right? And I just feel that it's in crescendo, it's just continuous testing of how far can we go
Absolutely.
before, right, the shit hits the fan and people react. And so to answer your question, yeah, I was livid for a nanosecond, and then I took a deep breath and said, what would you expect, right?
Right.
It's almost not surprising anymore of what comes out of that whole camp, right? Because it's intentional. It's
Yeah.
very intentional. But it was highly offensive, and it was just a reminder, I think, for us as Puerto Ricans on our status as a colony, and one of the few colonies that still exist, right, of the US and in the world, really, right? Um, Puerto Rico was invaded by the US in 1898,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Moved from Spanish rule, Spain, to US rule, okay? Has been the guinea pig, right? For everything from testing for birth control, from doing um how do you say, operations and, you know, testing medications, all kinds of stuff in Puerto Rico. Our resources have been also depleted. We have been really um, tapped into from a human resource standpoint too, right? Because
Yeah.
I want to point out Puerto Rico did not receive US citizenship until 19 years after the US became, right, the ruler, right, or
Hmm.
you know, the sovereign nation owning Puerto Rico as a territory. And it was in 1917, so they could go and recruit, not even recruit, mandatory, right, enlisting of
Yep.
Puerto Ricans to go to the war.
Yep.
Okay, so people just need to understand the history behind this, right? Because I know that a lot of even fellow Latinos, right? I've heard comments, right? But you know,
Hmm.
you squash it immediately when they understand the history. You say, "Oh yeah, but you guys have citizenship, right?" And we say, "Yeah, yeah," but that's been paid with blood and
Exactly.
life, right? They in 1917, 19 years after the U.S. took over, finally citizenship was given, but it was in exchange for, and not even exchange, it was so they can send kids go to the countryside, to those jungles you just mentioned, the
Yep.
rainforest, okay, and go find all the young men, 18, 19, your age to enlist, you're coming, okay, without understanding the language, without
Right.
understanding the culture, to go and fight in this war. And today, FYI for everybody, okay, Puerto Ricans over index, right, in serving in the military in the US when compared, right, with the percentages with other populations here in the US, okay, of US citizens that are
Hmm.
serving in the military. So, you know, I just feel like there's so much, like you said, right? Lack of knowledge of
Yeah.
the history. Puerto Ricans represent all ethnic groups too, in the sense where we have influences from Europe, from indigenous people. For example, you see me here, and I'm 15% Taino Indian, right? And I know
Hmm.
it because I did my ancestry, okay? And I have black too, okay? And so then we're that mixture, right, of European, of black, of indigenous
Yep.
influences in our ancestry. And so I feel like we embody, right, humanity. Okay, we have also people that identify as Puerto Rican, that have Middle Eastern, that have Asian roots, right? We have like the Chinese Puerto Rican,
Yep.
you know, which actually there's a restaurant here that, side note, here in Central
Hmm.
Florida, that they told me I have to go eat right on Colonial, right? That I'm planning to go actually this weekend. But in any event, right? Chinese Puerto Rican, they're like, oh my God, the food it's gonna be like flashbacks to my childhood, right?
Yep.
And so where I'm getting at is that people be informed. We need to be informed before we start talking and then out of line, because I feel that this insult, okay, and it's not a joke. This was
Right.
intentional. This is just part of the continuation of this narrative coming down from the freaking escalator,
Yep.
okay? About second class citizens, less than, you know, shithole country, freaking, okay, aliens or whatever you want to call it, okay? And so, no, we're done, right? And I'm so glad Bad Bunny finally came out. I'm so glad everybody's even Ruben Blades. He's not, he's like like you. He's an honorary Puerto Rican, right? He's
Mhm.
from Panama, you know, but he also put in, everyone's putting out a statement. And so I'm, you know, I'm just glad people are now being more vocal about this and not being so meek, you
Right.
know, about speaking up and speaking out and just calling a spade and saying enough is enough, basta ya. Okay, done.
Yep.
You're gonna respect us, okay, and that's it. And then doing it in New York, I mean, like, really?
Right.
Everybody has a Puerto Rican friend.
Exactly.
And with us, Chris, you've experienced this. I don't even want to describe it. You describe it. I want you to talk to us about the people, what you saw in Puerto Rico, okay, when there was so much need, when they were holding resources, billions of dollars that didn't go, when they were throwing paper towels,
Yep.
okay, at people in need, okay? You tell me what you saw and how people were reacting to each other,
Yep.
okay, and to you as supposedly an outsider, because I know that you didn't feel like an outsider.
Right.
Talk to us about the character of the Puerto Rican people.
Yeah, and I think it for me it was most evident in like community and um everybody just kind of like was it was like everybody was your next door neighbor in a sense. Like you know people were helping each other out that had no business helping that person. If you were to like I don't know, oftentimes in the US, like if your car broke down on the highway, nobody's gonna stop unless you're you know unless you're a AAA or whatever that you call. But in Puerto Rico, it just seemed like no matter where you went, everybody was friendly and saying hello to each other and stuff. Um, uh, but it was just like, again, people coming together. Even in the documentary, like there's um, footage of just the whole community going and helping to cut down trees that had fallen in across the road, even if it wasn't blocking their driveway. They were opening up the road for everybody else. They were helping to even prepare for the storm and fix doors and fix windows and even uh, help herding some of the animals that had gotten loose and stuff. And it was just a big sense of community. And like I remember even I was out there obviously with my camera and filming Alex Diaz and his wife Lira and their two kids uh, and just being out there. There was obviously people getting curious with a camera and stuff, and people would be like, "Hey, what's going on here?" And Alex would tell them what I was doing, and people would just come up and start telling their story. And I couldn't even, again, understand I was having it translated to me, but people getting emotional and coming up, not knowing me at all and opening up and telling me their story, offering me, food or obviously a hug and a kiss and a kiss on the cheek or what have you. Was just I don't know. Again, I felt, yes, I was there with the Puerto Rican family, but I was welcome everywhere I went. People were honest and telling me their story. It was such a place so rich in culture and music, and everywhere you went, even despite physically seeing the damage from the storm in places, people were having a good time and in uplifting spirits until you brought up the storm. And naturally then that's when it got real and serious. And I don't know, I just really appreciated the realness, the sense of community that of really that, like, it takes a village and to really feel that. I feel like that's something that's often lost this day and age, that sense of I think communities before the internet became what it was and cell phones and everything, you were kind of like held to a standard in a community, because if you uh, did something crazy, like everybody knew about it, and you would, that was kind of like your village, and you wanted to make sure that you had a good standing in your village. um, and not that like people were doing it to have a good standing, but it just felt like everybody was um, uh, being a good citizen, a good community member with each other and for themselves and for their families. And it was just something that I was like, wow, I haven't seen that since I was a kid, before the internet and stuff. And it was right there in Puerto Rico a year after this devastating storm, yet there was like this resilient like culture and love and sense of being that just kind of like seems to transcend the storm. And I don't know if it was in part because of the storm that rallied everybody together, that you go through a trauma and bond like that, but I think it just is who the Puerto Rican community is. And even stateside, you're my sister from another mister, right? And just the relationships that I have with people who are just kind of like the most loving and open and honest and caring and fiery people that don't call their island a piece of garbage for letting in the ocean, or you're gonna
Like
feel the
heat.
backlash of that.
Yeah,
So
you're gonna feel the heat, and you're right. And you know what? One, because I'm hearing you speak, and I just need your confirmation about this.
Mhm.
When you went to Puerto Rico in the midst of the crisis and of so much loss and so much lack of just basic
Yep,
human needs, right? Including food. Did you get fed?
I got fed very well.
Right? And so, because I feel that that's a missing chip, okay, that
Yeah,
a lot of people have. They're missing that chip, and we
yep,
need to rewire, okay, our minds and our hearts and connect this shit, right? Like the head with the heart and the gut, right? If your gut is telling you, I don't know, this something, it's like I'm leaning this way because I don't know, that's where I'm supposed to go, or because that's what I've been doing. But your
right.
gut, come on, man, is telling you this is not right. And you could see it in that audience, right? At Madison Square Garden. The
Yep,
people in the back were like, oh snap,
right.
what just happened, right? That's your gut, people, telling you this is not all right. It is not all right. Okay? And so anyway, let me calm down. That is where it all comes down to our basic sense of humanity, and recognizing where you're making a transgression, right?
Hmm.
Okay, and that human dignity is being broken, or not respected, or not valued.
Right.
Okay, and we've already long gone past that, right? But this here with the Puerto Rican community, again, is the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yep.
Okay, and I think a lot of Latinos are feeling this too. Okay, and at the end of the day, we need to show up. We need to show up at the polls. We need to preserve democracy. We're growing in numbers. Okay. And we need to model the behavior that we were taught, and that were part of the principles of the American family and the values, supposedly, right? That America has, and that we
Right.
still have. I want to believe that most people in America, right here in the US, are good eggs
Yeah.
that want to be kind, that they want to be generous, that they want to be compassionate, that they want to share, that they'll take their shirt off their back, to help another human being that's, down in the pits,
Yep.
And so anyway, because that we have a saying in Puerto Rico, que donde comen dos, comen tres, right? Where two people eat, three can eat, right? And so
Yep.
that's why I brought the whole topic about the food, because there was scarcity of
Right.
food and water in Puerto Rico. And in the midst of that crisis, okay, el hermano, Chris, right? Our brother Chris, that's here visiting us to tell our stories and tell the world what's really happening here. Oh, he's going to get fed, right?
Yep.
Because he's kind, because he's compassionate, because he's inclusive, because he's loving, because he gives a shit. Okay. And so anyway, I'm just, talk about conservative values and family values.
Yeah.
That's it. And I honestly feel that, in Latino culture, you're going to find that. I don't know what's going to happen after this general election, but I got to tell you something. The Latino community and the Puerto Rican voting bloc, okay, is going to play a critical role. Okay. And Mike Madrid said this in his book, right? The Latino Century, a critical role in redefining what this two-party system is all about. We're going to redefine what the Democratic Party looks like, okay? And we're going to redefine what the Republican Party looks like, because you know what, people? Conservative and progressive values coexist in Latino culture. And we navigated just fine. We navigated just fine. Okay, in Puerto Rico, the issue is not values. We're clear on our values. We're about community, about supporting each other, loving each other, sharing, feeding, right? A visitor and a guest, and treating people well and with respect. Respeto is number one. Okay? Our issue is the colonial status, right? That's our fight, right? That's our internal fight, and you saw that too, right, Chris? Okay, that's
Absolutely.
that's our beef. Our beef is like what's gonna happen in this relationship, in this screwed up relationship, right? That we have, with the U.S. in the sense where we're a territory. What the hell is that all about, right?
Right.
Okay. We also have a saying, te peinas o te haces rolo. It's like you put on the rollers or you comb your hair, right? Are you gonna blow dry your hair? Or are you gonna, do the perm? Like, it's like, what are we doing here? We need to figure out what this colonial status, right? And get rid of it. Okay. But that's our beef. Okay. From a value standpoint, we're clear. We navigate conservative issues
Yep.
and progressive issues just fine. No problem. No problem. Okay? And human life and dignity comes first. So even with the abortion issue, for example, you ask most Latinos are gonna say, if the mother's gonna die, if your daughter is gonna freaking die, okay, does that one? Oh, I want to say the vast majority, as conservative as they are, and he says, no, la nena has to live. My daughter, no, the mom's got to live, right? Because then she's got the other kids, right?
Right.
And we want to make sure she can have other babies too, because we love big extended families, right? And so that's just one example, right, of how conservative and progressive issues can coexist. Okay. And they're negotiated, right, on a case by case basis. I don't know. I just feel that most people would dig that, no?
Right. Absolutely.
I don't know. So anyway, I was livid again for a nanosecond, but then I was like, I'm not surprised, right? And
Yep.
so I really hope this puts a fire up people's tushies, and that they go out to the polls and exercise their freedom to vote, really, and that they speak up, and that they run for office too, start running for office and really change the way we're doing things, because this ain't it.
Right.
This is not working for everybody. Okay. And this name calling and all of that is like, I'm over it, right? Oh, but
Right.
but an asshole's an asshole, and the guy that said that, he's an asshole.
That's true.
Anyway, any closing remarks, Chris? This is more like a let's set the record straight, right? Kind of thing. And any parting words, Chris?
Yeah, I think just you should always start to question when somebody makes like huge generalizations about a place or a people. There has never been a state in the United States or a country I've been to, or a city or a town even, where I can say that entire place is garbage, or is or that there's no good people that come from this area or what have you. There are, all levels of good and bad people all over the world, in every community, in every town, in every country. And to label an entire place as like garbage, you just got to start asking yourself, what is the intent behind that? What is the logic behind that? Because again, even if you live in a place where you have neighborhoods near you, or you, again, higher crime rate areas or what have you, there are good people that come out of these places. There are people who do amazing things, who you would never think could have just as easily been a statistic based on where they came from or how they were brought up. And you find these resilient people that again come from all walks of life and from everywhere. And in my experience, probably over index in Puerto Rico of people who show this resilience, and who can overcome a challenge, and still have a smile on their face, and still feed the gringo that that's strolling into town. But yeah, just think, there's a lot of things on the news. There's a lot of people probably in your friend groups, or whatever organizations you belong to, that have opinions about stuff. But take a moment just by yourself and just think, how do I feel about this? Like, as a human being, how do I feel about these comments? And I guess if you come out on the other end saying that you agree with that person who said what they
Then you're
said,
an asshole too.
then you're an asshole too. But also ask yourself, do you have the information to make that? Have you been to Puerto Rico? And if you haven't, then do you really have the ability to make that judgment to begin with? Because again, I highly doubt that the comedian who said that has ever, stepped foot in Puerto Rico and had an experience like I had. And again, just I I was there in a very rough time in Puerto Rico, in Puerto Rico's history, and I was welcome with open arms. And I feel like anybody who thinks that that comedian might be right, I would urge you to go to Puerto Rico and see for yourself if you still agree when you leave. And that would be my closing remark.
Thank you. And I got to tell you something. If you can't go to Puerto, let's say the guy went to Puerto Rico and still says that, because plenty of people that been to Puerto Rico and still have that opinion, right?
Mm.
And so it is what it is. They're not, between the Puerto Ricans that live on the island and the ones that live on the mainland US, there's 9 million of us. Okay? Get to know us. And when you get to know us, you'll know what it is to have a new relative, if you're nice, if you're a kind person, right? Okay? If you come with a sincere and open heart. Okay? Because all we want to do is love on people. And I think, and isn't that the threat, right? I think
Yeah.
that's the triple threat, actually. Number one, we're growing in numbers. Number two, we're lovable. So lovable, right? And number three, we're resilient as
Yeah.
fuck. Like, I mean, like resilient and talented, and we will figure it out. Okay, that's where our ingenuity comes. Okay, they say that necessity is the mother of invention. We have a saying, ¿verdad? La necesidad, ¿verdad? Es la madre de la invención. And it's because of that. That's what becomes a triple threat. Okay? That we figure it out, because when you come from a place that's been colonized, okay, that has been lacking in resources, that's like this, like the other, always been treated like the other, okay, you have to resort to figuring this out and becoming an expert on getting things done with less. Okay? And when you master that, forget about it. Then you come to the mainland, and given the opportunity, it's game over, right?
Right.
And then on top of that, we're lovable. My goodness, right? You're going to agree with me on that, right, Chris?
Of course.
You know? So we're kind and lovable and funny and giving and warm, right? And inclusive. Okay? There's nothing more that we wish to is to feed you, right? Like to feed. Listen, my grandmother raised, okay, 7 kids on her own, and I got to tell you, so that's how my parents met, okay? Because my uncle was an older brother of my mom's, right? And my father was his buddy, and they were in the neighborhood. And he says, "Oh, it's dinner time. My mom lives in this neighborhood. Let's go have dinner." And my father said, "You crazy? Like, I can't just show." He's like, "Yeah, come with me. She's gonna feed you, right?
Yep.
She's gonna feed your ass, right? Because she always has food. My grandmother always had food on the stove, and that's something that's passed on from generation. And that's not exclusive to Puerto Ricans.
Right.
That's exclusive to all Latinos. They're gonna feed you because that's the base. You cannot survive and live if you don't eat. And so
Right.
we understand the importance of feeding another human being. And that's just a basic human right to get fed and well, too. Okay? And so anyway, I could go on a tangent on this, but where I'm getting at is never underestimate the pride, the resiliency, and the talents that the Puerto Rican community has, and the history that we have also here on the U.S. mainland, okay, of the contributions that we've made, everything from the arts, right?
Yep.
From the arts to the military and everything in between, to innovation, the medical field, technology, the astronauts, no? I mean, we might be small, but we're mighty, okay? But we're certainly not a pile of trash, okay? So anyway, thank you for sharing space with me, Chris.
As always. Likewise.
I love you.
Love you too,
And
Samí.
we will regroup after this general election. Help us, God. That's it.
That's it. I was like, I don't know. I think that was.
Help us, God. You had it right there.
Yeah. I love it.
This concludes this episode of I Have Something to Say. Thank you for tuning in, and tell your friends to find us on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes. And remember, if you have something to say, it's time to show up and speak up.